First, first, let me say that we were very glad to be able to come here today to get a briefing on the mill and its truly heroic workers. It is extraordinarily impressive that in a space of a week after this terrible explosion, that two of the three paper machines are up and running. And that is a real credit to the workers who make this plant go. They have worked night and day to reroute electrical cables, to change piping, to procure the pulp that has allowed this to happen. We are united at both the federal and the state level to try to get the company to rebuild the digesters on the pulp side that were ruined in the explosion. It is a miracle that no one was injured, and a real credit to the bravery of the employees who adjusted valves and took other safety precautions to ensure that it wasn't even worse. But the pulp side of this plant is devastated. What I'm most concerned about is to encourage the owners of this paper mill to rebuild the pulp side, which employs about half the workers, so that we can also get the wood supply chain to be working again. There are so many loggers whose jobs depend on this mill. There are truckers whose jobs depend on this mill. And of course, there are those who work directly on the pulp side of the mill. But you see everywhere the sign, Andro Strong, and certainly the people of this mill have shown their extraordinary dedication, their work ethic, and their bravery in all that has occurred in the last couple of weeks. I'm delighted that the two state senators who love this mill and know the people who work here, in many cases the workers are multi-generation families who have worked at this mill, that they were able to join today in this visit. So I'd like to give them each a chance to say a few words before we turn to your questions. Thank you. Russ.
Well, I was just so thankful to be able to come here today and see what's going on and see that the mill number 4 and number 5 is back in operation. But first I'd like to say that it's just a miracle that we had no loss of life. I guess that's my greatest concern, that as I watched those videos that day, I was just thinking back of what had already happened in Franklin County in the past. And then the important part is to make sure, as Senator Collins has already mentioned, that the lifeblood and the economy of the Central Maine is based on mills like this, and we hope and pray that this mill will be able to come through this and rebuild their digesters and keep this great workforce that they have here, that has people from all over the Central Maine working here, and some of them have worked here, as Senator Collins mentioned, multi-generations, and we have some of the best paper makers in the world right here, and we heard that today, and we want those paper makers to be able to continue to work here and help our businesses, our loggers, our truckers, our restaurants, gas stations and whatever. Our lifeblood is tied to this mill. Thank you.
Yes, Senator Collins and Senator Black, I thank you for all the kind words you said about this mill. My family has worked here for generations, and when you go in and see the devastation that happened in here today, you know how strong of a community this is and how strong this mill is. And there's a sign out there that says Androscoggin Strong. I believe in that, and You know, we're here today as unity to see what we can do to help make sure that these two digesters hopefully get back up and running. We're here, you know, as I said in there, that my grandfather always told me if there was a will, there's a way. This mill has the will. They've proved it over the years since the 60s. And I think it's up to us to help find the way with them to how we get this up and going. So again, if you watch the explosion the day that it happened, your heart sank because you knew somebody had to have been injured bad or dead or killed. And then to find out that nobody was, you got the greatest relief. And then it sunk into you what really happened here and where we're at today. So we only hopefully look forward to the rebuilding of this facility and making it strong again and making it one of the #1 paper manufacturing facilities in the country. So thank you.
I'll wait till this goes by. Well, fortunately, the 2017 tax reform law that we passed helps companies do investments and be able to write off the cost of those investments much more quickly. So I hope that that will be an incentive. It's one that we talked about today. What this mill has going for it most of all is an extraordinary workforce. The mill manager told us that they were on track for a record year, that 2020 was looking great until this explosion occurred. And he could not praise enough the dedication of the workforce that allowed them to get 2 of the paper machines up and running so quickly. So I think the workforce is a tremendous asset. We talked also about permitting. Whenever there is a new project underway, there are many permits that are required, and the 2 state senators pledged their best to expedite the permitting system. I have offered to make any calls that might encourage the rebuilding of the pulp side of the mill, whether it's calling the president, the CEO of Pixel, or anyone else. I would be glad to encourage them to do so. And my hope is that the tax changes, the offer to help with permitting, and most of all, the dedicated workforce will ultimately lead to a decision to rebuild the pulp digesters. I will mention that this is not going to be a quick process. The cause of the explosion is still unknown, and the company has hired a forensic team to assist in determining exactly what happened. But boy, when you see the devastation, the force of the explosion, it must have been truly extraordinary. And that's why we are all so grateful that no one was injured. It truly is a miracle. Anything else? Do you want to add anything? Sure. The governor obviously has some very tough decisions to make. She is reaching out to the private sector for ideas, and I had conversations all the way here from Bangor with individuals who have a lot of good ideas on how we can still protect the health of the people of Maine and yet gradually allow a reopening of the economy. I also had a conversation this morning with Secretary Azar as part of a conference call on how we can help our rural hospitals. They have been devastated by the epidemic, not because they've had a lot of cases in rural Maine, but because they've not been able to do elective surgeries and other more routine procedures. Just this week, the federal government offered new guidance that would allow them to resume that work. And in addition, there's a special fund that we approved just last week in Washington that has another $75 billion for our hospitals, with a set aside of $10 billion for our rural hospitals. And I think that is going to be absolutely essential in helping our rural hospitals survive. But I think the reopening, based on what the governor has said, will be a gradual one. I'm very worried about the tourism industry in our state and what the summer will look like. And I know that the governor is reaching out to a lot of people, and she's got some really tough decisions to make. Should there be, I'm sorry. Yes, and there is assistance for seasonal businesses and employees. For one, I'll wait till that goes by. There is assistance. I was the co-author of the Paycheck Protection Program, which has just recently been renewed with another $320 billion on top of the $349 billion that we had in the first allotment of funding, which went through very quickly. Since the second tranche of this program started up on Monday, we have had more than 1,500 new loans approved for small businesses in our state, including a lot for individuals who are self-employed. We also got the Treasury to issue new guidance so that seasonal businesses could use as their base period the summer season of last year. And that should help them get larger loans, forgivable loans, to bring back their workforce. And that's the whole goal of this program. The whole goal of this program is to ensure that our small businesses are able to stay afloat and that their workers will be paid, even if they've been furloughed, whether or not they're brought back. And so we're trying to make sure that that is the case. Yes, I am, and thank you for that question. There is assistance for state governments and for municipalities that was included in the CARES Act. Unfortunately, that assistance is limited to direct costs that are associated with the coronavirus. I believe that that should be expanded because we've seen a huge drop in income taxes, in sales taxes, in excise taxes on our cars, boats, snowmobiles that are paid to municipalities, and I think that needs to be expanded.